What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for coming to my talk. My name is Kevin. As you guys mentioned or heard, I work for The Graph as DevRel engineer, and I also support the BuidlGuidl on Scaffold-ETH. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about how you can build your first application on Ethereum. We'll try to do a demo if we have time. Let's see how it works. So I don't actually have any slides. I just kind of want to walk through some assets for people to get familiar with. First of all, when I first came into the space, I was kind of struggling with finding the right tools. There's so many different tools out there these days to accomplish the same thing. And it was a kind of a long journey, but eventually I found myself actually to Scaffold-ETH. It was kind of my entry into Ethereum. Because it really provides everything you need out of the box to get started quickly on building, and it also is really great for hackathons because you can spin it up, prototype, and basically iterate really quickly. It's built on Next.js, so it's React with Next.js. It's all TypeScript, which is amazing, and everyone should be writing TypeScript. And it's also integrated with WAGMI and RainbowKit. And it's got a huge community behind it. So we're going to spin it up in a little bit, but I want to kind of walk through a little bit some other tools. Another thing you can look at is Cookbook Dev. Cookbook.dev is just a great resource if you're just starting into writing smart contracts. It's a good place to find starting smart contracts. So on there's a lot of OpenZeppelin contracts. If you just do a search for OpenZeppelin, you should be able to find all the OpenZeppelin standard smart contracts. And you can also spin them up inside of Scaffold-ETH, which is really cool. They have a direct integration. The internet's a little messed up here. But you can go to the homepage, and you can go to Cookbook, and you can basically look at contracts. Here we go on the top right, if it loads up. I don't know why it's not loading. Okay, well, we'll give it a second. But yeah, any kind of ERC20, ERC721 is available through there. There's also some examples of just whatever you want to build, staking contracts, stuff like that. And inside of each contract, you have this option to open it in Scaffold-ETH. And you can actually download the entire project, and it will be a Scaffold-ETH project. And all you need to write is the deploy script, and you can kind of have a good starting point. So it's a great spot to go. Sorry, the site's not loading. Another thing that everyone should be familiar with is Speedrun Ethereum. Speedrun Ethereum is a great tool for when you want to validate what you've learned and being able to implement this into a real world scenario. And so if you go to speedrunethereum.com, you can come on here, and there's a series of challenges that you can go through, right? So the very first one is very simple. It's kind of a no coding kind of challenge. You don't have to actually write any smart contracts. You deploy an NFT, and it teaches you about how NFTs works, teaches you about Scaffold-ETH as well. And it's just kind of a fun little first entryway into Speedrun Ethereum. And then you get more difficult. You learn how staking works, right? How does a staking contract really work? You learn about how to do swaps, with a token vendor where you deposit some asset and get back another asset. And then you start learning about randomness in a dice game, which is kind of teaches you that on a blockchain, there's this kind of whole other level of randomness that can be gamed, and it's kind of just a real good example of that. And then eventually you build a DEX, right? You get very much kind of down the rabbit hole on how a DEX works, how liquidity pools work, and stuff like that. And after you do these challenges, you actually join the BuidlGuidl. So anyone can be in the BuidlGuidl. And you have some special Telegram chats where you can work with other devs on building. Eventually, there's some other ones like stable coins, which is actually a new challenge, really cool. Prediction markets, another new challenge, which is, prediction markets are really hot right now, so you actually build one there. You learn about deploying to a layer 2. And you learn about multi-sigs and SVG NFTs, which are more advanced NFTs. So there's lots of fun stuff you can do in there. Another cool thing that I've been working on for the last few months, I work obviously for The Graph. I'm also in the BuidlGuidl, and so Speedrun Ethereum has been a very influential part of my experience coming into the space. I created a new platform called Graph Builders Basecamp, which is kind of aimed at the same kind of scenario. You're building writing smart contracts, but this actually teaches you and validates your experience on how to write subgraphs on the graph network as well. So if anyone here is interested in the graph and data, this is also a really good, and I have a video that I'd like to play for this so you guys can check it out. huge shout out to our design team at The Graph who created this. Awesome. So yeah, you guys can check that out. You can go to basecamp.thegraph.com, and there's a series of missions you can do up here on the top left. They range all the way from, like, again, very basic, like an orientation mission, all the way down into like more advanced subgraph development. And after you do each one, you actually get an NFT. So you mint this kind of like on-chain soulbound NFT. That kind of like just verifies, that you've done it. The cool thing is this entire platform is also decentralized. It's utilizing smart contracts, and it's all built on Chainlink functions. So you can technically spin up this project, which is a GitHub project, and you can run all these on your laptop. You don't even actually have to connect to the basecamp.thegraph.com. Because you're using smart contracts and the Chainlink decentralized Oracle network to mint those NFTs. So really cool use case of the graph as well. And if you look on like the BuidlGuidl website, so like if we go to the BuidlGuidl, right, and we go to the app, and I connect my wallet, so here's me. You can see that I have the build on there. So my ENS is cryptomastery.eth. And so if we click on that, there's a link to the live demo, and then there's a link to the code. So you can come here and kind of see what it is, how it works, and you can spin it up on yourself as well too and check it out. So please do that. But let's get into some coding. Let's see, we have 13 minutes to go. Let's see if we can push a application out really quickly. So we're going to use Scaffold-ETH. So we're going to go to scaffold-eth.io. We're going to grab this npx command, which is basically like a script that you can run that gives you this kind of like choose your own adventure to spin up an environment of Scaffold-ETH, right? So we're going to do npx create ETH at latest. We're going to choose a name. So we'll just do ED for like ETHDenver. It's going to ask you what framework for your chain that you want to use. So we support Hardhat and Foundry. So if you're new to writing smart contracts, Hardhat has been around a lot longer. I recommend that. It's probably easier to find like documentation. If you just want to write your smart contracts and tests in Solidity, Foundry is a good one for that. It's a little faster. It's a little newer. You're really up to you. I'm going to choose Hardhat. It's going to kind of go through and install all the dependencies for you. So it is a Yarn package. So it has a package JSON file. It's a mono repo, and it has everything defined for you. So this is going to spin up all the proper packages for you, and then it's going to format the files for you and all that good stuff. I've actually already did this to save time just because of the internet connection. So I have a directory called ETHDenver here. When it's finally done, you'll get this output that says, okay, are you ready to get going? We need to spin up a chain, we need to deploy our contract, and we need to start the front end. So that's exactly what we're going to do, is we're going to do yarn chain, which is going to let me spin up my Hardhat. We're going to go over here. You always need a couple windows open with Scaffold-ETH. So you can just do this in separate terminals. It's up to you. I use tmux, which is just easier. And we're going to spin up the front end. So we have this virtual chain on the left. We have our front end on the right on port 3000. And then now we can go into this last directory, and we can do our yarn deploy. So all of these commands are yarn this, yarn that. It makes it really easy to orchestrate. Now we've deployed a contract to our Hardhat node, and we get a contract address, and we get some gas, and everything's good. We have some console output, and you'll see this last line is the most important thing. It created a special set of TypeScript definitions for our smart contract, which is really powerful because when you're writing in your front end and you want to be able to like interact with a smart contract, using those TypeScript definitions is like really, really awesome because it's super easy. And if we look at Scaffold-ETH running on port 3000, we'll take a look and see what it looks like. There's a really cool feature called the Debug Contracts tab. And if we go here, it takes a second for it to compile because it has to compile for the first time. So we'll give it just a second. There we go. We're on the wrong network. Let me disconnect. There we go. And you'll see this. This is like your Hello World page. kind of can ignore this. It just kind of gives you some hints. But here in the debug contracts tab is where the real magic of Scaffold-ETH is it has this ability to ingest those types and just build this kind of UI for us, which is really cool because then we just know how we can test our contract without having to write any front-end code, right? So I can tell right now that this contract has a string called greeting. It has an owner, which is an address. It's got some like a Boolean, and then it's got a counter, and it's got a read function and a couple write functions, right? So it's really easy just to know what's going on. I haven't even looked at the contract, but let's change the contract. So we have this like building unstoppable apps. We can try to change the greeting to something else because we see there's a set greeting function. So let's call it ETHDenver. Boom, 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 and try to send. It's going to tell us we don't have enough to pay for gas. There's a built-in faucet, so you just hit this little faucet button. It will give us some funds from the faucet. Then we can hit send again, and there we go. We updated that state variable to ETHDenver, right? So we've kind of like messed around with the contract. We get a receipt, transaction receipt that has all the response. We can also pay some value if we wanted to, like if we do 0.01 ETH. You'd think you could just hit send, but we need to contract, or we need to send it in Way. So there's this cool little function here that allows me to translate that to Way. And then I can hit send, and there we go. Now I got some money in the contract here. There's $22.67 in the contract. But there's this withdraw function. Can I withdraw the funds? No, probably not. It says I'm not the owner, right? Because I've kind of protected this. We know that this has some kind of protection because it's probably like blocking me, right? It says, no, you're not the owner. You can't withdraw those funds. So let's look at the contract real quick. Let's open it up in VS Code or Cursor, whatever you prefer. So we have VS Code here. We have our packages folder. So Scaffold-ETH is basically, this might be hard to read. Let's see. It's 2 folders in the case of like a standard install. I will tell you that there are extensions with Scaffold-ETH, which are really cool, and one of those is called the subgraph extension. That's actually how I built the Graph Builder Basecamp, is using the subgraph extension, which has a built-in like the graph functionality to spin up the graph. But then there's other ones too. So you might want to use an extension, and if you do, there might be additional folders. But in this case, we're just doing the standard kind of Scaffold-ETH setup. So we have our chain, and we have our front end, right? Those are the 2 folders that we'll spend most of our time in. Inside this packages hard hat folder, there's a contracts folder, and then there's our contract. So we have this kind of starting contract. It's basically exactly what we just saw, in the UI. So we could probably make some changes here. So what I'd like to always do is kind of just like make one simple change. Like let's do address, public, the boss. We set a boss. And then maybe we want to have a function to like update who the boss is. Set boss, something like that. There we go. So we have this kind of new variable we're adding, right? And then we have a function to update the boss, right? And then we're going to pass that in as a string, or as an address, sorry. And so if we want to deploy those changes, we can come over here and just do yarn deploy again. It will push the new changes to the chain. We could also force a contract. Like if you need to like make sure you get a new contract for some reason, you can do a -- reset, and it will force a new contract. Just kind of a nice little neat to know. And then if we go back to Scaffold-ETH now, it will refresh, and we'll get that new boss variable, right? So we have this boss, and we can set who the boss is. So let's set it to Vitalik.eth. Boom, he's the boss. All right, there we go. So now Vitalik is the boss. And you can see it's got this cool like ENS resolution. It kind of shows us, it's got a little copy paste thing. And so this is cool for like testing. You make a smart contract change and then you publish it. But maybe you want to like edit the front end, right? If you go to Scaffold-ETH and you go to the docs, there's a whole section on components. So everything you see in the Scaffold-ETH, like the little address component that has the ENS resolution and the copy button is there. There's a balance component that lets you switch from ETH to dollars. There's an address input field that does ENS resolution, so you can put in an ENS. And then you have the ability to interact with the contract as well. So if you want to read from the contract, or if you want to write to the contract, there are existing hooks in React that let you do that. So it's super fast. You don't need to like mess around with writing your own hooks. They're there, and they work great. I mean, there's a whole bunch of apps that have been built on Scaffold-ETH that are really, really great. So I'm not going to do any of the front end stuff because I only have 5 minutes, but let's try to deploy this to a test net. So at this point, we don't have a deployer account because we've been using these keys that come with hard hat. So we need to generate a deployer account. So we can do yarn generate. That's going to spin up basically a private key and a public key pair and store it on my machine with a password. So let's do that. There we go. It creates a public key right here, which is here, and I can fund that. So, and I can, if I want to look at, see what my balances are, I can do yarn accounts, and then I can put in my password again, because we don't want to keep private keys laying around on the machine. And it gives you a little QR code, and then it goes through and checks all the balances. Let's just send some funds there real quick. So I'm going to use MetaMask. Let me grab the address again. Let me just send base Sepolia. Yeah, Sepolia. So Sepolia. I have a lot of Sepolia here. Let's send 0.25. Sure. Confirm. Cool. So I just sent some funds from my MetaMask to this deployer. So if I do yarn account again, it might take a second. So actually, you know what we'll do is let me do it one more time. Yarn account. See if it went through. There it goes. So now we have a balance of 0.25. So now if I want to deploy to Sepolia, I can do yarn deploy -- network Sepolia, and this will push it to Sepolia. That's it. It's going to ask me for the password one more time because I need to sign a transaction with hard hat. It's going to compile my contract. It's going to create the transaction for me, and it's going to push the contract, hopefully. It's a little slower, obviously, than localhost. And then while that's doing that, we need to point our front end. There it goes. It was successful. We have the contract deployed. We need to point our front end at Sepolia. So let's go back to the project, and let's come down here into the Next.js folder, and let's look at the scaffold config file. It has the chains dot whatever. So we can do chains.sepolia, like that. This is basically the target network. So it does the chain ID, and it figures out what the RPC is automatically built with the built-in types. And so now if we go to Scaffold-ETH, we can load it up. Let's get refresh real quick. And you'll notice we get kicked out of the burner wallet. So before with Scaffold-ETH, you have this cool little burner wallet that's built in, and we didn't have to connect to MetaMask. But because we've published to a testnet, we need to actually connect our wallets now. So let's connect it. Boom, there we go. And then there we go. Now I have the debug contracts tab, and it's pointing to Sepolia. And I don't have a boss set. I could set it to vitalik.eth. Send. Boom. There we go. So I've deployed the contract, updated my front end. Probably the next step would be I'd want to publish my front end. You could publish it to like IPFS or some kind of like decentralized network. But we do have or like Fleek is a good option. But we have this built-in ability to publish to Vercel. So you can do yarn Vercel. I think it's yarn Vercel. Let's see, what is it? Yeah, yarn Vercel :YOLO -- prod. Okay, so what that does is it basically it'll ask you to sign into your Vercel. It's basically just Vercel CLI. And it's going to ask you if you want to set up and deploy. We do, I think, yes. Do I want to use an existing project? Yes. Found a project. Do I want to use that one? No. Do I want to link it to a different project? No. And then you can just create it. So we can do ETHDenver and hit enter and no. And there it goes. So now I'm uploading my front end to Vercel. So in a few minutes, this will be available. If you have Vercel, you probably need to log in and make it the deployment public. But from this point, we basically built an app pretty quickly, like within 10 minutes. It's not a cool app. It's just something silly. But using Scaffold-ETH, you can see how you orchestrate very easily using those built-in commands. So I hope that was useful. And I'll be around here. So if you guys have questions afterward, I would love to answer them for you. But the TLDR is use Scaffold-ETH, speedrunethereum.com, and basecamp.thegraph.com. All right. See you guys.